Hello everyone. Do you remember your first car or the first time you drove? If you are an adult in the US, then there's a good likelihood that you have a driver's license. The USA is a big country, and cars are the main form of transportation. There are many reasons why other forms of transportation haven't caught on, but I won't be discussing that here. This video will be about my journey with cars so far in my life. But first, I must mention what I am drawing in this video. I am currently drawing a scavenger from Lethal Company. I haven't played much of it, but I have been watching it on YouTube, and it's been really fun to watch. It's a goofy horror game that's multiplayer, and my friends and I have been enjoying it. Also, I would love if you guys would check out my Redbubble store. I'd prefer to open my own store and website, but my busy schedule forces me to use print-on-demand sites, so I hope you understand with that. Okay. My first car wasn't the one mentioned in the title. My first car was actually a 2000s Toyota Solara. I didn't know it at the time, but this was a pretty awesome first car. It was the Golden Edition with the V6 engine. The car was basically a two-door, sportier version of the Camry. That car was fun to drive. It was old for the time. I drove it in the late 2010s, but it ran pretty dang well. My dad bought me the car from a state auction. My first car was originally in an accident that totaled the vehicle. The vehicle was later sold at an auction for a low price. My dad bought it thinking it would be a good kid car for me. For not much more money, we fixed up the car to pass state inspection. At this point, it's considered a salvage title, meaning we can legally drive the car, but it is still in rough condition. My dad is a car guy and can handle a lot of car problems. He was comfortable taking on a beat-up car. The car being a kid car, my dad didn't want completely refurbished it to make it a rebuilt title, i.e. being the same quality before the totaling accident. He just wanted to be good enough to drive, but not costly enough that if something happened to it, it wouldn't be too big of a deal. Mind you, I'm not an expert in this kind of car legalese, but I'm sure you can look up the process on your own time if you are interested. My dad would also buy these kind of cars to flip. During the time I was learning to drive, my dad would fix around, 3 cars it was. My dad liked to work on cars, and he liked making money where he could. Anyway, the Solara was the car I learned to drive on. It got me to school and back, and then later to work and back. It was beat up on the outside, but as I said before, it drove great. I learned how to change tires, brakes, and of course I learned how to change the oil. My dad was trying to prepare me for the future, and I love him for that, even if I didn't understand cars much at the time. All these teachings made me a lot more comfortable when I did have to move halfway across the country. That leads us to the car mentioned in the title, the 2013 Dodge Dart. This car. Holy cow, this car! I guess this part of the story starts after I graduated high school. I have been dating my future husband for a few years now, and plan on getting married after I finish my associate's degree. But I remember seeing a blue car parked in the back by my dad's shop. Yes, he had a shop/extra garage on the property. He is that much of a car guy that it was a priority for him. I thought this was just another car he was flipping at first, but I asked my older brother if he knew anything. My brother answered along the lines, "Oh, he's flipping it for someone." Okay, not out of character for my dad, but then I thought, my dad did fix up a car for my brother before he left for college. My dad did this so my brother would have a much more reliable vehicle being states away. Maybe this car was for me. My brother did answer it a little weirdly. I later asked this question to my mom. She broke the news to me and explained that my dad bought the car so that I would have a better car down in Texas after me and my future husband got married. This was an important moment for my dad and I. I was my dad's only girl. He was very protective of me, and he didn't like the idea that I was dating a guy online at first. Let's just say he was grumpy about it for a while. My mom told me my dad bought the car. I knew he had finally accepted me wanting to move to Texas and get married. I cried. This car symbolized my dad finally letting me go and finding my own way with my soon-to-be husband. Yes, I'm still emotional about this. No words can describe how much I love my dad. I think it was either that day I first saw the car, or later that week my dad would call me out to the front of the house and have me drive the car around. He explained to me that the car was mine, It was another car from auction and still needed to be inspected. I want to say the pandemic was just starting at this point, so the city's inspection place was closed. Until then, I was totally cool driving my Solara. I also told my dad that my mom broke the secret to me, and he just kind of shrugged. My family sucks at holding these kind of secrets, so he figured I would know. My dad and I would later plan a small road trip to a nearby city to get the car and what would be my younger brother's future car inspected. I told you, he likes to flip cars. Not even the pandemic could stop him. I was finally driving around the blue 2013 Dodge Dart. Some more info about it, it is the 1.4-liter engine with a small stock turbo, otherwise known as 1.4-liter Turbo Limited. It was an automatic transmission too. This will be important later. Oh, goodness. I would later learn to love this car because it was easy on gas, even though it takes premium, and it still had some power behind it thanks to the turbo. It was about this time in my life that I started to like cars more and more. The car drove fine while living in my hometown. The only time yes, I'll be referring to the Dart as a she's a temperamental car, showed any signs of anything bad was a random check engine light for the transmission. Unfortunately, this check engine light would turn off just as fast as it turned on. It was weird. It wasn't until after I moved down to Texas that the real problems started. I noticed that the transmission light would come on more and more often. There were times I was driving to work where the car would lose power and the light would come on. The car would say, "Manual mode not available." At this point, I didn't know much about cars, so I was very confused. I got off the highway, parked at a gas station, turned my car off and on again, and it was fine. This would happen a few more times before my dad advised me to take a look and see if there was any recalls on the transmission. Turns out there were a crap ton of recalls on this car. Also, similar things about this car. The car is branded as a Dodge, but this was mostly a Fiat-built car. If any of you know, the Chrysler Group, the parent company of Dodge, recently bought Fiat at this time, and it was the reason why the car was really a Fiat in Dodge clothing. Fiat is known for smaller compact cars, so it isn't surprising that the relatively heavy Dodge Dart had some issues with the undersized parts. I would take the car into a dealership to take care of the worst recalls, the ones that looked at the transmission. The dealership told me it would take a while to get everything looked at. The problems I've been having might not be because of the recalls. I'd wait 2 to 3 days for them to call me and say that they were done. I go to collect my car and they tell me that the problem isn't with anything on the recall list, but the valve body in the transmission. They suggested replacing the valve body. It'd be about $2,000, but I said no because I knew this car wasn't worth that much. Also, dealership pricing? Holy cow! They also said I needed new struts, wiper blades, and a new engine air filter. I said no to all of that. But guess what they were going to charge me for an air filter? $60 for an air filter. I bought an air filter for $20 and replaced it myself. Easy. The wiper blades are a bit more reasonable at $30. But I'm still hung up at $60 for an air filter that takes 2 seconds to replace. I was very mad at the dealership. I still am. I looked at the receipt again for the video, and rage washed over me again. We would later learn that this dealership also screwed me over in other ways. For a while, my car ran great. I think when the dealership replaced the transmission fluid, it fixed a lot of the problems. She ran fine for about a year, then suddenly, and without warning, she wouldn't start. Jumping the battery didn't work, so my husband and I suspected the starter. If we left the car alone for a few hours, the car would start. But if I drove it recently, she wouldn't start after I turned her off. Starters can have dead spots in them, so it wasn't completely absurd to think that the starter is the issue. For those who don't know what the starter is, it starts your car. Self-explanatory, right? Well, there is a little more to it. The starter is a small electrical motor that connects the engine to, I believe, the flywheel, and the starter rotates the engine so that the engine can eventually use its own momentum to run off itself. I don't explain mechanical stuff well, so just look it up if you are curious. Basically, the engine needs to be rotating to start. After many more times this happened, we finally bought a new starter and took it to a local mechanic. This mechanic was really cool. He was really forward with me and gave it to me straight. The original starter wasn't the issue. The last person to work on my car put one of the bolts that holds the starter in place in the wrong spot. Basically, this bolt pressed up against the flywheel, stopping the car from ever cranking. Who was the last person to work on my transmission? The dealership. My theory is that the dealership put on the starter wrong and didn't bother to fix it, or didn't even notice it. Now this wouldn't be so bad if the bolt was taken off properly, but no, the bolt fell into the transmission. I just want to say it was no fault of the mechanic. He was trying to get it out to best of his ability, but it was stuck in there. The mechanic tried getting it out with a long magnet, but that didn't work. He then called me and explained that he needed to take apart the transmission to get to it, and it was going to cost a pretty penny. I needed my car, so I let him go forward with it. And the story keeps getting worse. The mechanic found more than just one bolt in the transmission. Let me make this more clear. The mechanic found multiple bolts in the transmission. He cleaned out the bolts and also made note of the very glittery transmission fluid. Not good. Not good at all. In most fluids, you don't want to see a lot of metal flakes. It's usually a bad thing. In transmissions, it's bound to happen. Eventually. Transmissions allow your car to have a large variety of speeds and pulling power. There are multiple gears to allow this to happen. All these gears need to have contact with other gears, causing friction. Friction causes wear and tear. You can probably see where I'm going with this. Now I can easily visualize a manual transmission. They're a lot simpler. As soon as we switch to an automatic transmission, things get complicated quickly. The extra bolts were causing more friction than needed and probably tore apart some gears. Metal against random metal is bad. But you probably don't need me to tell you that. The mechanic cleaned out the transmission and is probably the reason why the car still runs today. He did say, though, that I should sell the car sooner than later. He even looked into getting me a lower mile transmission, but I turned it down. It was more money than I had at the time. I was fortunate enough just to have enough money to pay for the mechanic in the first place. After that, I paid a lot more attention to how the transmission was working. I noticed the transmission would slip in gears 1 and 2. When gears slip, it means the teeth of the gears aren't meshing together properly. You can often feel this when driving. If the teeth of the gear are really bad, you could also hear grinding sometimes. Not good! I only heard grinding one time after the mechanic worked on it. I told myself I'd drive this car till it dies, and in the meantime, I'd save up for a new one. Months go by without issue. Eventually, my husband and I go on vacation, and we took his car. When we came back, we noticed that my parked car now had huge dents in the driver's side door. Some idiot sideswiped my car when backing out of the parking spot next to me. I was pissed. This was my car. I did what I could to take care of it, and the sideswiper didn't even leave his insurance information. Before, my car didn't look that bad, but now someone had to take that away from me too. It wasn't uncommon to see dented cars in the city in Texas. People there are aggressive drivers, and they rarely pay attention to the other drivers around them. Wrecks were a common occurrence, and police rarely pulled anyone over for being on their phones or speeding. I hated driving there. This was the driving culture that stuck out to me when I realized someone hit my parked car. While I was mad, I knew the car wasn't worth that much. I had to let this go. I guess my car finally looked beaten up. At least I knew no one was going to steal it. We were getting ready to move. We were thinking about selling my car and driving my husband's car up to the new state we'd be moving to. We had a different but highly rated mechanic look at it, and they explained that my husband's car was worse than we thought. Lots of leaks and oil leaks everywhere. My husband no longer felt comfortable driving his car all the way up to our new home. So we took another look at my car. The worst gears in my transmission were the lower two, so we kind of figured that since we'd be on the highway most of the time, we'd be able to take my car without much worry. Highway speeds use the higher gears, aka the better ones. If there are car people watching this, I am so sorry with how badly I am butchering the inner workings of a transmission, but this is just how we thought to justify taking my car up to the new home. We only had one minor issue driving my car long distance, and that was the tire's pressure sensors. The sensors would overheat and turn off. This is only temporary though. They turned back on after cooling down. This story has gone on long enough that there are a few more instances of this car giving me mini heart attacks. This version of the Dodge Dart is supposed to be sporty, so it has something called grille shutters. These sit in the grille and allow more or less airflow into the engine bay. These aren't on most normal cars, but we know my car isn't that normal. We currently live in an area that experiences all 4 seasons instead of just the many shades of summer that Texas had to offer. So now, my beat-up car experienced cold for the first time in a long time. A check engine light pops up and I think, okay, transmission's finally going out. Great. Earlier than I wanted, but I will deal with it. I go to the local auto parts store to get the engine error code. As a quick side note, the guy working there was surprised I knew how to operate a scanner. I know the stereotype is girls don't understand cars, but it was nice to prove him wrong. I plugged the scanner in, and I thought I saw the abbreviation for the powertrain system, and I knew it was the transmission. The actual abbreviation was the AGS, Auto Grill System. I think Auto Shutter System would be more descriptive, but that doesn't look very good as an abbreviation. I finally pulled out my phone, took a picture of the code, and looked it up. It was then I learned that my car wasn't dying yet. For some reason or another, the auto grills got stuck open. Not a big deal. At least the car is getting air. If the shutters were closed, it'd be more of an issue. Not soon after, my car would give me another issue. She didn't start. But this time, I was more prepared. I knew the battery was old and needed to be changed soon. Another sign was the jumping gauges. After our problems with the starter, I knew what to look for when it came to a bad battery. This is when you start the car and the gauges would twitch and then stop. This is a telltale sign for a bad battery. In most newish cars, the battery needs to be really good. The newer cars require a lot more power to start, and when we checked the voltage on my battery, it was still high, but not high enough. We got a new battery the next day, and the issues were solved. Even the check engine light from the auto grill system went away. That was nice. I also had a time where I slammed the already dented door into a cart corral. Now there is an additional vertical dent where I hit the pole. I cried when I did that. Hashtag woman driver moments. That brings us to today. She runs just fine. I still worry about the transmission, but I mostly travel on highway, so I continue to use that same logic that we used to bring the car up here in the first place. I will think like this until proven otherwise. I used my savings for our big move, but now I am saving a lot to pay for a new car after mine finally dies. As a side note, my husband and I jokingly named the car Navi for being annoying with all of her alerts. Navi is the annoying fairy from Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Hey look! Hey listen! Are all familiar terms with both Navi and my car, so it was kind of fitting. And they're both blue. If I had to leave you with anything, please don't buy the 2010s version of the Dodge Dart. Not worth it. It's fun to drive as long as it works right, but when will it ever fully work right? If you want to get the original Dodge Dart, that would be awesome. I'd be all for that. I love the look of those older muscle cars. Alright, enough rambling. If you like this video, please subscribe. I plan on doing more of these videos here and there. And please check out my Redbubble page. If you would love to support me and get this design as a sticker, you can. Thank you for watching. Be safe out there. Bye-bye.